welcome to another session of Teams in 20. Today we're going to be talking about Champions Network, and we've brought the amazing Beti back, who knows everything there is to know about adoption and change.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Hi, everybody. So today's session is going to be building your Champions Network, which is very, very exciting if we get to that part of our projects. So we're going to talk about today who are champions and why we need them, steps for creating a Champions Network, champions' roles and responsibilities, KPIs, and a couple of other things I've managed to sneak in as well. And hopefully I can fit in as much as I can in the 20 minutes. As Joe said, 20 minutes, perfect time to learn, keep engaged. Always better to leave the session wanting more than being tired, yawning, and thinking about what you're going to have for lunch. So I'll kick us off straight away. What do we mean by champions? When we think of champions, we normally think of sports people, gold medal winners, Usain Bolt, Serena Williams. Whilst we don't quite mean we need to give out gold medals in the workplace, although that's not such a bad idea. If you can do that, that would be awesome. These champions on screen and many, many more have demonstrated persistence, grit. They've embraced innovation. They're hardworking. They've often achieved many firsts in their field. It is the same principles with champions in the workplace. A good champion is open to embracing change. They are sponsors of the change. They're willing to help others, train and coach, pass on their knowledge, share it. They're very proactive, and they're almost always first to trial something new. Being a good champion is often little about what you know in the first place, but how much and how quickly you're willing to learn and share this knowledge. So it's all about your character, how enthusiastic you are for something. So when it comes to any projects, any change, you want to create a champions network, but perhaps the skill, the training is not quite there yet, that doesn't matter. You just need a group of the right people to join, be proactive, and get excited about change. So why do we need a champions network? It's about driving new ways of working. For example, a lot of this is, this is a Microsoft call. I'm going to talk a lot about it, sort of pretend we're talking about a Microsoft 365 change, some kind of technical project. So we're going to be driving these new ways of working. New tech comes out all the time. That changes the way we do things, how long it takes us to do things, certain tasks. Champions are the greatest people to drive that for us. They will provide support and obtain feedback. So normally what you might have is that one person that you always go to for advice. Let's call him John. And every time you need some help, you'll ask John, hey, John, how do I do this? Is there a better way to do this? Well, imagine if we had 100 Johns and 200 Johns, how much easier it will be to get the help that we need. So the Champions Network is that's what it's there for, to help people in need share learnings. And obtain feedback is really important as well, because they are almost like they're on the front line. They're hearing where people need help, what they're interested in. They can feed that back into the change management team and say, hey, recently I've had all these questions about SharePoint Online. Let's put some training out about that. Let's put a bit of comms about that. So they're really, really valuable to give the feedback into the project team, into the change management team about what is truly happening on the front line. Champions are also really good for reinforcing positive behaviors and share success stories, so they can really highlight where people are doing well around the business and reinforce the positive. So when people are doing something, embracing these new ways of working, well, they can really celebrate that and help to elevate those stories across the company. Just below that, you will see on the screen a little graph. It's a study that we did in 2019 about how people like to learn. And then you see percentage of learning methods versus helpfulness. And one of the absolute top methods for learning came out as learning from your co-workers. This is why the Champions Network is really important. It's an incredibly useful way to learn. I would also recommend, if you've got the time, to perhaps do a similar survey with your organization and ask the people how they like to learn, and then adjust your methods from there. So how do champions fit into the change team? So Hopefully you're lucky enough to have a great big change team with an executive sponsor, with a business owner. You might have an adoption and change lead, project management manager, comms lead, a training lead. The champions and these community managers form part of that change lead. They are really, really important agents of change. Especially if we have smaller ACM teams, the champions are kind of an extension of that team, helping us drive the changes. So how do we create a champions network? Couple of steps here. So number one, we need to identify these potential champions. We need to consider, especially for bigger organizations, location, expertise, department. How do we want to organize our champions? Or what's potentially better and easier is you put the word out there and champions will come to you. We want these proactive people. When you say, hey, we're looking for champions for M365, likely most champions that hear that message will put their hand up and volunteer because they are very proactive in the first place. They will want to get involved and help. You also need to train and coach your champions and provide them with the skills and tools they need to drive the set change. So again, when it comes to M365, some champions may be excellent in Teams, but perhaps may need a bit of upskilling in SharePoint or one of our other applications. So train them and coach them through that and make sure they have the necessary skills to be effective champions, or to know how to go and learn that information for themselves if you don't have the capacity for the training. You also need to provide a good structure for the community leads and for the champions themselves. And later on, I have a couple of more slides on how we can manage the network, organize it. But in essence, the structure will be, when are we meeting? What are we doing? Why are we here? Who is the lead of this community? Who runs it? Who do we go to if we need help? So we need to nurture it like any other community. We, of course, need to empower and support our champions and give them the authority to act as the agents of change and involve them in decision making. The more we involve our champions, we let them know what's going on, what we're working on, what projects are coming up, the more they're going to get involved and sort of really feel like they're part of the team, as opposed to someone just gets drip fed information every now and again and is asked to share that on. So get them involved as early on as possible and get their feedback because they know what's going on. Monitor and evaluate. Like any successful community, we need to track outcomes, look at the feedback we're getting about the community. If nobody knows about it, nobody knows who the champions are, we should be working on that. Monitoring and evaluating regularly helps identify gaps, issues, and opportunities for improvement. Last but not least, celebrate success. We need to reward our champions, recognize their contributions, and really make sure that they feel, this will be a task on top of their existing job. So we should be really thankful and grateful to our champions who do want to get involved. How to find the right champion. So as I mentioned earlier, we want to look for people that have influence around the organization, credibility, and most importantly, enthusiasm. They're willing to commit the time. Hopefully you can work with people's managers and make sure they have enough time to do this job, because it can consume quite a lot of time, especially when big changes are coming through. And these champions absolutely should have a growth mindset, embrace change, and are willing to learn new things quickly. And a good rule of thumb is to aim for sort of one champion per 50 employees. So if you had an organization of 40,000 people, then a good, size of that network would be 800 champions. It's not, one is better than none, but this is just some kind of guidance to give you an idea of what you should aim for. So what are the things you need to do to have a successful champions community? Very commonly, we will hear, well, we have a champions community, but we're not really seeing the benefit of it. Yeah, they're quite disengaged. And that can happen, and that's okay. So here are some tips so that hopefully that doesn't happen. So we need an executive sponsor for the community and a community owner. So someone around the business with authority and influence that is willing to help it grow, willing to sponsor it and give us the resources and the time it will need to grow this into a really useful community for the organization. It will need a vision. So why are we here? What are we doing? What is our purpose? As a champions community, we need to have some KPIs, so our key performance indicators. What are we going to achieve and by when? This will help us keep the community on track. And having some kind of strategy for the organization, for the community, sorry. And then on my next point is aligning the champion strategy to the organizational strategy. This is really important, and when you probably see the most benefit out of the champions community, when you know where you want to be as an organization, what that vision is, for example, for Microsoft 365, for productivity, for employee experience, we can align our champions to work towards that goal with us. So we're all working towards the same thing. And then enough champions, if you can grow that network, sharing the responsibilities along amongst more people, well, of course, that is going to help. So it will be great to have a good number of champions, as I said, roughly 1 per 50 employees. And really importantly, a space for the community to thrive. Again, I have a slide later on this for what this could look like, some form of management platform for the champions, where we can look at tasks and what we need to do and who's doing what. So I'll show you that too. Regular touch points. Do not set up a champions community and then forget about them for a month. Set it up when you're ready and have the time commitment to carry on and engage with this community. Otherwise, it's very easy to then lose trust in it and what we're trying to achieve. So you've gone through the effort, you've got your champions, they're really excited, ready to go. And then if we don't engage them and then nothing happens, it can fall flat very quickly and be difficult to then spin it back up again. It's really important to have roles and responsibilities for these champions. And I have some examples on the next slide. And make sure there's some kind of time dedication for the community. Roughly 1 hour per week is usually more when you're just starting out, because they'll need to perhaps train and upskill, and there'll be a numerous welcome and onboarding calls to begin with. But once it's up and running, roughly 1 to 2 hours per week time dedicated. So when you are looking for these champions, set the precedent early on that there is a time commitment to be part of the network and to stay in the network. So examples of some of these roles and responsibilities can be, you need to understand the change. For example, with M365 tools, you need to have a basic level across the M365 stack with a deeper understanding in a particular area product. So maybe choose a specialism like Teams or SharePoint. You need to be passionate and excited to evangelize the tools, processes, lead by example, help others to learn, build awareness for the change, talk about the changes in team meetings, etc. Whatever you decide these roles and responsibilities to be, this is just a bunch of examples from various champions networks I've set up over the time. So I've just picked a couple of good ones. You can have 3, you can have 5, have as many as you need that really truly represent what you need from the champions in your network. And then something I wanted to mention on talking about roles and responsibilities is the difference between a champions community and an enthusiast community. Champions are there, they're dedicated, they've got that time commitment, they're passionate, they'll have the roles and responsibilities. That community will need nurturing and looking after. It drives specific business goals and it is high maintenance. It is something we need to look after and spend time on, so that we get that return on investment on the community. A community of enthusiasts, they're not dedicated, they are passionate still, they don't have roles and responsibilities, community looks after themselves, they drive their own goals as opposed to specific business goals, and they're very low maintenance. A lot of the time I do hear, Beti, we've set up our champions community, but the engagement's not quite there. They're just taking the information. They're not sharing it on. Well, congratulations, you've created an enthusiast community, a group of people who want to learn, take the knowledge, leave it there. That is fine. The good news is you can have both. That is not a bad thing. That is a great thing. So you have a bunch of people who want to learn about the change, experiment, trying things for themselves, and then you hopefully will have your champions community that is then dedicated, committed, and driving specific business goals. So not a bad thing to have one of each. You may already have a champions community that you can turn into an enthusiast community. I did mention it's also important to have some KPIs. What gets measured gets done. We've heard that one before. So a good champions community will need the KPIs as well as the community lead and a business owner who will be responsible for achieving these. So if we could just create them, but no one takes on the ownership of achieving them, again, we probably won't achieve them. So an example KPI for the champs community can be increase Teams adoption by 5% by the end of the year. Okay, we can look at increased Teams phone usage by 10% by the end of the year, etc., etc. So make these, smart objectives, make them measurable and timely, and then do review them and check that you are on track for these KPIs. I know we're almost out of time. I am almost done. We do need a space to manage this community, especially the larger that it gets. So I wanted to give a couple of different options to suit different organization sizes. So if you don't have a ton of time, a ton of resources, you can simply create a Teams team. We love that name. And some example channels I've put in for you. You can have a general channel to talk about the products, the tech, hold your channel meetings, talk about accessibility, etc., etc. So this could be your internal way you have to manage the team, sort of the internal structure. You can also use something called the Champion Management Platform, which is a free resource from GitHub. I've included the link in the resources. It's an app in Teams, provides that structure that you need. In the resources, I've linked it so you can really look at to what it does. And then the ideal solution in a way could be an automated gamification app. We could have something called Adoptify, which is a Microsoft service. If you're interested, we can talk about it. Doe coming on screen makes me think I have ran over. I will very quickly wrap up. To interact with the community, we can do the similar. So you've got managing the community and interacting with it. So that's people coming to ask for help. We can also do that in Teams, through the platforms, or of course through Viva Engage. I have a snapshot of weekly activities we can do with champions. We can give them update briefings. We can send them newsletters. It's quite a straightforward table. Just as an example, when you're starting out, how you can organize these champion activities. And finally, my resources slide is right there.
Yeah, and I pop those resources into the chat as well, so they should be available for everybody. Thank you so much, Beti. Perfect timing. I did take up a couple of minutes from your pitch at the beginning, so I'm always really glad to hear from you and your insight. I think one thing I've learned from Champions Networks is they can be the best resource that you can possibly have, but if you don't nurture them, then you'll be building a new one again in a couple of years. So
exactly.
Nurture them and keep bringing on new people. So that is it from us. I'm going to I've put the survey link in the chat already, but we do like to know how you felt about today's session, what you'd like to see in the future. And next week, we're going to be talking about some great resources. Daria and I have got some great resources that we use all the time. We share with our customers. We thought we'd just refresh your memory or point you to something new. And that is everything from us today. So thank you so much for joining. Thanks, Beti. You're an absolute legend. Hope you'll come back. Speak soon. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Bye.